I've always said in this struggle, like in all other historical struggles, there are many men and women who do wonderful things, but they are never sung. Sometimes you don't even know about them. Sometimes you don't know them as a group. But the dedication to the cause, their commitment to the struggle has always been a source of inspiration for their generation. And I'm very pleased to be here in Minnesota to interact and exchange some ideas with you so we can together see how best we can consolidate our collective effort, how we can move forward, meet the challenges that are ahead, and particularly to ensure that we are decolonized forthwith without further delay. The one or two ideas I thought I should share with you, not because you don't know some of these issues, but for purposes of refreshing our memory, so that we recall, we see where we've come from, where we are, and where we are going to. In all my travels, I've met a group of people. Some of them are very pessimistic. Some say, to use our own master, you think that this thing so will win and so. My answer has always been simple. Where there is a beginning, there is always an end. Where there is a beginning, there is always an end. In those good old days when the British colonized us, I remember they used to make us sing in the Empire Day that the British Empire shall never perish. And we kept on singing those things. It didn't take long, the British Empire perished. So where there is a beginning, there is always an end. There can be no beginning without an end. Our country, our homeland, has suffered a triple colonization. The Germans visited us, stayed there for some time. Their colonialism ended. The English, in league with the international community, took over. It ended. The French, in league with la République de Cameroon, have taken over since then. I think it will be a self-deception for them to believe that their colonialism will endure to the end of time. Because it cannot. So there's bound to be an end. But sometimes when you see the arguments that are advanced by some pessimists, you may sometimes develop, say, well, this looks really a pretty hard struggle. If you look at it from the perspective of the United Nations, which is a very heavy, bureaucratic and slow organization infused a lot of politics. The key players are the big powers. These big powers themselves might not be too keen, so to speak, about our struggle, because they themselves have skeletons in their cupboards. The British are still a colonial empire. They still have colonies in the West Indies. They are still battling out the Falkland Islands. They still have Gibraltar there and other islands scattered in the South Pacific. So each time you raise the issue of colonialism, like a reminder of the crime they themselves have committed. The Americans are still battling out with Hawaii. We all know what happened to Hawaii. Americans seized it. When the American farmers, they're calling the Marines. And recently, Hawaiians have been jittering for independence. The Americans might not be too well disposed because an issue of decolonization might remind them. The Chinese themselves, they are still battling out with Taiwan. So, and if you add to Taiwan, you know the area where is this religious, they call Tibet, that has for a long time been fighting for independence. And I remember, as part of the team of international lawyers, we met in 1992 in London on the issue of self-determination for Tibet. The same arguments were canvassed into the same arguments were canvassed at that time. We came to a conclusion that it was entitled, Tibet was entitled to self-determination. So China would not be a very hot party. What about Russia? You remember just a few months ago, a few weeks ago, the Russian president said, what happened to Russia was a terrible mistake. In other words, we will still have loved to keep the empire. Well, that's too late now. But they're battling out with Chechnya. So again, you will not be too hot about that. So if you look at this scenario from this point of view, you might say, well, where are we going to have big power support? But the history of the world has shown, as I've said, that there can be no beginning without an end. It's bound to be an end. In part because our struggle is firmly located within international law. International law has abolished colonialism. In fact, it is a crime to colonize other people. It constitutes part of a crime against humanity. And there are so many, a lot of international instruments that guarantee the right of self-determination. Whether you consider the right of self-determination in a colonial context or in a non-colonial context, it is immaterial. The point is the right of self-determination. The right which inures to all people who are dominated or colonized. Because international law says no one people has a right to dominate another people. We are a dominated people. We are a colonized people. We have been since the British lady set their foot in India, way back in the 1840s, consolidated by creating Victoria in 1858, which many people tend conveniently to forget. And we only became part of German Cameroon several years after the Germans had proclaimed the protectorate of Cameroon. The British were in Cameroon officially from 58 up to 1887. 30 years. Then they handed over to the Germans, 1888. And remember, the Germans had already proclaimed the Cameroon protectorate in 1884. When the Germans were defeated, that was in 1914. By December 1914, what is to the southern Cameroon had been liberated from German rule. But the Germans held on to their initial colonial protectorate, which is today the Republic of Cameroon. So we've gone through all these phases of colonial rule. So when you look at that, you then say, well, big power and so on might not have support and all this and so on and so forth. But at the end of the day, the law, international law, always prevails in all of these matters. And it's international law that forces the former colonizing powers to decolonize. I'll tell you a little story. At the height of decolonization by the United Nations, Portugal was asked to decolonize its territory. And the Portuguese claim was they have no territory to decolonize, which was rather very surprising to many people. What do you mean you don't have any colonies? What of Angola? What of Mozambique and all these things? You're talking about those? No. Those are simply part of the motherland, separated from the motherland by accident of geography. So we don't have any colonies. But in the end, the law prevailed. Portugal acknowledged the fact that we were colonial power and they had to decolonize. And it is because our struggle is firmly framed and located within the context of international law that we have been able to bring a series of cases against our colonizer. And all of these cases have ended in success. Long before Banjul, long before Abuja, the tireless Albert Mukong of blessed memory, had filed a suit in the Human Rights Committee in Geneva against the Republic of Cameroon, raised the issue of self-determination, and listed a series of rights that have been violated, individual rights violated. Well, the Human Rights Committee did not entertain the part of self-determination on the ground that the Human Rights Committee deals only with individual violations. Not that Mukong was not right to have brought it, but that it was individual violation. But recognize that all those rights Mukong alleged had been violated by the Republic of Cameroon. And the Republic of Cameroon was asked to pay Mukong compensation, which they did. Then, of course, we move one step further. Abuja was a strategic case that was brought up. Framed not in terms of violation of individual rights, the right to self-determination. Not brought in the courts of a colonizer, because no law in that territory recognized the right of self-determination. But brought in a neighboring country which has domesticated the African Charter, which provided for the right of self-determination of peoples. And that case was adjudged, and we won that case. Nigeria has an obligation under international law to espouse our case before the relevant international bodies. You must have seen in the net more recently that Fondinka also won his case against the Republic of Cameroon. Again, following on the footsteps of Mukong, he raised the issue of self-determination and the violation of several of his rights. Again, the Human Rights Committee ruled that, well, as a committee, there's some other UN body perhaps that deals with collective rights, but for us, and the law under which the petition was brought, the complaint was brought, we can only deal with individual complaints. And that's why they limited themselves to those rights of the fund which were violated. And they held that the Republic of Cameroon had violated his right. And they said he was entitled to compensation and ruled that those rights should never again be violated by the Republic of Cameroon. We've scored a series of victories. And what each of these victories indicates clearly that there is something wrong somewhere in our homeland. Now, Banjul, when Banjul came, Banjul was framed in two parts. One was alleging individual human rights violations, and the other one, the violation of our collective rights as a people. We could well have limited it just to collective rights, but we felt that if we did not bring up the issues of several of our people who have been assassinated, who have been murdered, who have been disappeared, who have been tortured, who have been raped, who have been maimed, and so on and so forth, history was not going to forgive us. And that it was important for us to expose all of this as a clear indication, not only that we were colonized, but by a brutal colonization, far worse than anything we've ever experienced, either under the Germans or under the British. So it's necessary to frame that case in that manner. And I can tell you that when it came to individual violations, the colonizer had no reply at all. They did not challenge us on any one single violation because we gave names and places and instances. Nor was that all. We now talk about the violation of our right as a people, right of self-determination. And to substantiate it was necessary for us to make a historical background. And we showed how our political rights have been violated, our economic rights have been violated, our social rights have been violated. In terms of our economy, all of us know that the southern Cameroons have been plundered, looted, right from the very first moment they claimed that there was so-called federalism. From that moment onwards, everything systematically being plundered, looted, like stripping us naked. Our social rights, the way we carried ourselves in our homeland, the way we conducted our affairs, our educational system, all of that has been subverted. If you read the book by Jacques Benjamin, he's a Canadian. He details how the Southern Cameroon was systematically stripped naked and how the educational system was destroyed, even though the United States government made effort and the Southern Cameroon government tried to educate us by getting America on the ASPA scholarship. I know we still remember about those kind of African ASPA and so on. Do not believe that the Yaoundé colonizer got America to stop that program. Why are you educating these people? Well, think on a government-to-government basis. Americans pull back. The result of that has been that we receive truncated education, and anybody who had dared venture the University of Yaoundé knows what I'm talking about. Or going to Polytechnic knows what we're talking about. So, at the time some of us went to University of Yaoundé, all the teaching and instruction was in French, completely. Perhaps the idea was that they can have this, and within 5 years or so, they have been completely erased and all these things. But like somebody said, the harder they come, the more we realized our status, our situation as a colonized people. And some of us started rebellion even while in the university. They didn't say why. In a university which claimed to be a bilingual university and a country that claimed to be a bilingual country, one system should be imposed on another. And the failure rate in Yaoundé University was about 90% of our students. Now, you might not realize, because that had a terrible psychological effect on our own young people. They lost confidence in themselves and began to think there's something wrong with them. But these very students who were so-called characterized as dull and able to perform, once they crossed the border into Nigeria, Britain, the United States, excelled. So this would be one thing that the colonizer was determined to destroy. And there's no way to destroy a people better than they use the educational system. But when that has been destroyed, that is it, you have nothing else to show. And the same thing applies to the legal system. So we showed all of this, we exposed all of this in a petition in Banjul. We had thought that they were going to come and make a very serious rebuttal. Fortunately for us, they made a mistake of sending one of us, John Gute, in part because they lacked the expertise. They've always lacked expertise in different fields, and they've always depended on us for a lot of expertise. And they sent John Gute to come, and of course with the script. If anybody who knows how people who work for that government, that regime, are treated, and when they actually choose the Enonis and Musongas come here, they are always being trailed by a Francophone senior officer. They cannot go outside of the script that has been done in the presidency. They can't add a comma anywhere. And so John comes, it's one Francophone, there is another Francophone in the middle, and he reads in French what had been scripted for him. Of course, it was more political speech, there were no legal arguments. And I pointed out that, well, this is not a soapbox here. We're here to talk law. And all they kept on saying is, these people are secessionists. Secessionists. You want to secede? I said, well, but assuming that we are even secessionists, why do we want to secede? There must be something wrong somewhere. So in the end, at the end of the day, they failed in that endeavor to have the case thrown out. They thought they could use the word secession to frighten the commission. When they say, oh, this secession and so on. That strategy did not work. And once it failed, the whole case collapsed because they were not built on anything else. That was all their strategy, and so on. And I remember our first encounter by Jew with John. And after that, I hope they didn't tell on him, because after that, we had a chat together. We were all been schoolmates, right from secondary school, university, went to London together. And he said, Master, you push this thing, so that this stupid nonsense should stop. But the point I'm making is that even some of our people, you find their posture, so they know in their hearts of hearts that we do not belong there, that we are colonized people, and it's high time we free our homeland and establish the kind of society, the kind of government we want. At the last meeting, the last session we had in Banjul last time, which many people wrote on about it, so it was very interesting in many respects. First, because I was expecting John to come, he didn't show up. We sent his delegation. The delegation tried to have this whole thing stalled by arguing that, well, the minister is not here, so we cannot proceed. And the commission answered, no. As far as I'm concerned, the common delegation is here, minister without minister. You are the delegation, that is it. We must proceed with this case. So, and if some of you look at the presentation we made, the initial 5 or 6 sentences were in French. Why did I do that? The chairperson of the African Human Rights Commission is from Burkina Faso. It's a woman. Quite a number of the commissioners there are French speaking. Many of them whose knowledge of Africa is at best sketchy. What is happening, and who had never heard of the Southern Cameroon before. They've only known about Cameroon. Cameroon means to them Yaoundé, and so on. And so it was necessary to put them at ease by spelling out in the first 3-4 sentences what our concern was all about. So, for further elaboration in English. But I think the thing we did, and many of them at last saw, when we argued, that look, because we're determined to take the sting of secession from the government side. So look, these people cannot accuse us of secession. We secede from a country of which we're part. We've never been part of this people. Never been. Either before 61 or after 60. I would point out that this is a French territory that achieved its independence. We're not part of that country. Even when it was admitted membership of the United Nations, we're not there. This is one of the commissioners rather very surprised. Oh, you many of you know, I say yes, that's what we're talking about. So this was a case of saying secession, we don't understand. And international law says your border stands still on the date on which you achieve independence. That's what it says. You can't change that. You can now understand why they have been hiding their Independence Day. You can now understand why, if you remind them of independence on 1st January 1960, they will catch you, arrest you, and imprison you. Because they want to hear about that. To remind them of that, we remind them that, look, their borders were at a particular point. You are now colonizing another country. That's what we need to emphasize. Having emphasized that, we now presented a map of the Southern Cameroon. I think that was a killer one. With the government, it was not ready for that. It came to them as a shock. All they could say was, well, they've never seen a map of the Southern Cameroon before. So we said, okay, no trouble. We told the commission, we are prepared to give them 100 copies if they want. Fortunately, there was a machine outside at the city where you can photocopy the map, which we did. So okay, take it to our government. But of course, it was all a lie. We said they've never seen a map of the Southern Cameroon. It was all a lie. So Banjul, from a lawyer's perspective, as far as I see it, short of some cataclysmic, I don't know what, I'm positive that when the decision is given in December, in that case, it will be in our favor, which once more will be, perhaps in my view, the last nail on the coffin of these people. And from there, we now have to decide for ourselves what to do, how to move forward in that decision. So I'm very confident about that. Banjul will settle. If you look at the admissibility decision that was rendered, what the commission said was, and the reason why they couched it that way is because the Francophone commissioners were arguing that, oh no, this is a case of secession, the commission should look at it. The Anglophone commissioners simply said, look at Article 20 of the African Charter. It guarantees the right of self-determination. It is there in the Charter. So how can we run away from it? There is no right in the Charter which cannot be implemented. There can't be. Otherwise, why was it put there? So it must. And so the compromise of that was to say, well, the responsibility is to determine the legality of the so-called union between the Southern Campus and the Republic Campus. That put it very neatly. That put it very, very neatly. So they are going to determine, was there even any union at all? In our view, there was never any union. It was just a question of grabbing what it was. Never any union. So not talk of legality about it. So we're going to have that. And I'm very positive that from there, and my conviction is strengthened by the fact that these people, they put in no arguments on the merits. You say in a boxing ring that they throw in the towel, isn't it? And so on. There is no argument, they advanced no argument, nothing. Just gave up. So, which would be consistent with their policy. Because they thought they could frighten the commission out of this one. In the Dinka case, they refused even to put in appearance. Just could not. They had no arguments. In the Mukong case, they appeared 1 or twice and they gave up. What this shows is that these people have no argument at all. No credible argument whatsoever. Now, there is UNPO. Many people have heard about UNPO, that other aspect, that other line of the struggle. You know, if you're fighting the enemy upon different fronts, you know, that's what we are doing on different fronts. Now, UNPO is the Unrepresented Nations and Peoples Organization. It is an international NGO. It's an NGO. It has nothing to do with the United Nations. But sometimes the name is deceptive. And people look at it and so on. It has nothing to do with the United Nations. It's an NGO, an international NGO like Amnesty International or whatever. And their main area of activity is to ensure that peoples who have been denied a hearing because of the United Nations emphasis on states should be given a hearing. And they have observer status with ECOSOC, the United Nations Economic and Social Council. So the importance of UNPO for us is that we can pass through them to be heard, say in the United Nations, where we would not otherwise be heard because we are not a sovereign state. That is as best as it is. That is as best as it is. UNPO is not going to, some people think that it's going to supply whatever thing it is to fight whatever. They're not going to do that. They don't have that kind of expertise and so on. So their job is simply to highlight the cases that come to them and to give us a forum from which we can talk, a forum which otherwise we would not have. So that's what UNPO is. So, now having said all of this, now the challenge in front of us is what I'll call the devil within. The devil within. The devil within us. This fight would long ago have been brought to a successful conclusion if we had not shown this tendency of divisiveness, bickering, talking too much, posturing. And it is this that has created a lot of problem for us. Even when you have people who are well-meaning and want to deal with us, They don't exactly know whom they are dealing with. So we are a divisive people. The home front, on which we are counting a lot of leadership, has failed us time and time and again. I think the only time we had some element of stability and credibility was when Dr. Duma, the late Dr. Duma of blessed memory, was leading this struggle. Because the gentleman of the first order sacrificed himself, was prepared to do everything, and he had a command of the situation, he had authority. When he died, all hell broke loose. Different groups. The one child, although I don't hear about him anymore. One fellow in Bamida called one child. One child.
We don't miss him.
It's gone missing.
No, we don't miss him.
Oh! He proclaimed a branch. Then everyone resurrected from Nigeria. Then for Ngala doing his thing with Chief Ayangwe, and the whole people. I'm sure our people are extremely distraught by now.
Yeah.
Where do they put their head? No. We can't live a liberation struggle in this way. It doesn't work that way at all. And that is the challenge for us, that's the challenge for Minnesota. To make sure that we provide leadership.
Sorry, I didn't hear that last statement. That's a challenge
to Minnesota and to us. That will provide leadership as far as the struggle is concerned. Now we have so far deferred to the home leadership. You provide all leadership because you talk at home and all this and so on. Now given the record of failure consistently, now I begin to doubt how much wisdom there is in that. If you look at the model, the ANC model, the SWAPO model, and all of these other countries that have fought for liberation, you would discover that the leadership has always been located abroad. Always. But the reason is obvious, isn't it? When you are abroad, you are free from corrupting influence of the colonizer and other temptations that come with it, and so on. You are more focused on it. That does not mean that the home front is irrelevant. In fact, it's important. What it means is the leadership provided from the diaspora and directed inside to achieve certain goals. Many people who talked about Mandela didn't realize that when the ANC decided, resolve to relocate abroad, the leadership and others and so on, the other people were kept within the country, underground. The Mandelas, that was their job. To do sabotage work. That was their job. It is not that the ANC said, we're going to raise an army bigger than the United States Army, invade the whole South Africa and take over one day and so on and so forth. But it's like the Chinese, or like the Vietnamese general, Nguyen Van Giap said, you have to sap the energy of the enemy consistently, doggedly, year in, year out, to increase the transaction cost of the enemy. To know that to occupy that territory, you'll have to pay a dear price. They are getting it for nothing right now. Because we will not increase the transaction cost for them. If not, we'll make it such that if the French want to sponsor them to remain in the southern Cameroons, they'll have to increase the budget for the Cameroon 5, 10, 100 times to sustain the colonialism there. And that's the kind of logic that informed the ANC. That they will send in operatives outside, inside, and they did all of this sort of thing. Operatives did that, come out. Well, now wave goes in and so on, because we're also concerned that the operatives do not go and die, especially the experienced ones. Do their job, come out. Do their job, come out. Do that people go, and so on and so forth. And it got to a point where the South African government began to feel the pinch, blow up electricity pylons, disrupt telecom system, and so on and so forth. They found that it was becoming more and more expensive to maintain apartheid. That is the kind of thing I'm talking about. I'm not saying that the home front become irrelevant. I'm saying that we need to redirect, to give a sense of direction and purpose But right now, there's none. There's nothing. Now, I hear people talk. When we coined, and again, it's an abuse of that expression which was coined, the force of argument, not the argument of force. Now, let me explain to what happened. It was a response to the violence being offered by La République de Cameroon. And we were telling them that you will never win by violence. Means we have stronger arguments than you have. That's what we're talking about. And so on. At no time did we ever exclude the possibility, if that became necessary, to resort to means of legitimate self-defense. Colonialism is aggression under international law. And when you fight aggression, you cannot be a person that is violating the law. You have the right of self-defense. So to build our strategy exclusively in terms of always sitting on the table, churning out document, and talking force of argument. We've tried that experience for the past 40 years. It has not worked. And we all know that the international community quickly listen. They hear one shot there. So we need actually to rethink our strategy, to give a leadership that is purposeful, and to map out how we have to move forward to ensure, at the very minimum, that the colonizer does not sleep in peace in our territory. How we achieve that, how we go about that, the new leadership that is going to emerge. We had tried. We called on Fofo, we called on Chief Ayangwe, we told them, people provided new leadership. People sink your differences. Fofo pipe down, people pipe down. Let some new person emerge, some neutral person, get some new person. They are bickering, they are unable to hold a meeting like we're sitting here. I get Mr. Ndangam tell me one story. Fofo rise and tell me some other story. Mr. Mbinglo tell me a different story. They are unable to meet even, to agree. So do we cannot wait for them until I don't know when they are going to agree on this new leadership which we thought we cannot remove and so on. Of course, if tomorrow they were to come out with some new leadership and we say fine this and so on, ready to work with the diaspora and so on, we can say we can streamline that and so on and make sure that that leadership fits in within the wider picture which we are carving out here and so on. I think we must have to really think about that. That direction should come from the diaspora. Well, I know when they hear about this, when we take the initiative, they would accuse the diaspora. You've heard those accusations, no repeating. You are very comfortable here, enjoy good life here, isn't it? They are the ones suffering there, from we don't know how they're suffering, blah, 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 so on and so forth. Nobody ever realizes how much effort our people here in the diaspora get up from morning to evening, the nights they suffer. I've been several times in this country, and I was a student myself. I worked and I know what it means to earn a few pennies. You have to sweat it out. So contrary to our belief, it's not a life of luxury here. It isn't. People have to sweat it out. They have to suffer. You've seen increasingly, even our women folks are now forced to have their mothers to come home to babysit here. Because it's just tough outside here. So I don't know where they get this image that there's a comfortable life out in the diaspora where people don't live and enjoy good life and therefore don't know anything about suffering and so on and so forth. As if there's any of us here who doesn't have people back at home. So we know. But having failed us, we cannot wait until the end of time. We have to take certain initiative. And if that means displeasing certain people, well, that has to be the case. And so, but I do believe if we take that initiative and begin to see certain tangible results, everybody will fall in line. I was discussing with somebody I met in Nigeria, and he painted a scenario. Supposing tomorrow the colonizer were to announce the withdrawal of all his forces and all his administration from our territory, what will happen? Analysis was a total chaos. Total, complete chaos. Because we are not prepared to take over. We are not not even prepared to take over. What have we in place? And we can't be sitting here and talking without having a contingency plan in place. And people to man what, and so on and so forth. This we must have in our suitcase. So we don't wait until we are surprised tomorrow. When I was teaching in South Africa, people kept on telling me, they were confessing now, the blacks, this thing came too soon, we're not yet ready. This thing came too soon, they've been given us some time, and so on. So we ought to be fully ready with an administrative structure out here. If this particular, it just simply fits in, and not just having an administrative structure, but to run a country is not an easy thing. That structure must be maintain law and order. There must be. Because the first you're going to have is a lot of looting. First of all, the colonizer and withdrawing would have to destroy a lot of things. How do we ensure that those things are not destroyed? We have to. And this doesn't mean that we have to really think, and people have to think. We have to use our heads. And the good thing about us is that we are sharper than those fellows. We can use our heads, do a lot of things. All of you in the different fields of endeavor, which are all engaged, come in very, very handy. No sector is going to be neglected. Those are the things we want to think about right now. So when the hour strikes, we should be able to. I've heard people say, oh no, the thing is we should ask the United Nations to send the United Nations administrator. Then when they after administrator, then we then take over. Here are people, we say we're fighting with self-determination, we are ready and willing to our government. We say the United Nations will come and administer the place and so on and so forth. We're not serious. We aren't. So our commitment should show in that respect that we have thinking heads, suggestions from all of us that we all put down, that this is what we have, this is what we have in mind. You can set up here a think tank that will think about all of these things. From the military to the police to the customs to finances to bank to money to securing our energy. Because make no mistake about it, these people have made us depend on them, isn't it? So you can expect, it's a natural thing you can expect, that they pull out, they'll just cut you off from, what is that place there? They'll cut you off or something, wherever they're coming from. They'll cut you off. There can be no doubt about that. What is our replacement? We should already have been thinking about all these things. The one that our comes, we just move in. So that our people, the already poor life they have, doesn't sink again further down. Because there's nothing as terrible as you find that we're thrown into darkness for another 35 years. We go unable to come with some viable means of electricity. Or even drinking water system, or telecommunication system. I had a friend, telecommunication partner, who said, I can assure you, the day this happens, these people are going to disconnect. You can't make a phone call. So what happens? So we should are calling upon all of our engineers in all the sectors they are, our economists who are here, the bankers who are here, the marketeers who are here, who do marketing, all of these sectors, to brainstorm, to put these things together. So putting in waiting. When that moment comes, which I'm very convinced will not be too far off, we just move in very, very smoothly. We all know our country. We start beginning to think. Even in terms of policy, the energy policy, we might want to revise it. We might want to develop here the waterfalls in Mamfe, the waterfalls in different districts. So people should begin to think about these things and so on and so forth. And when you get in, the cutoff, you need to fly from the US to get to Southern Carolina. How do you get in there? These are things, I'm saying these are challenges. You have to think about these things. You have to think about them. So short the world, we have no airport. We can't fly to Tico because no plane landing in Tico. So what do we do? What are the alternatives? These are the kind of things I have to think about, elaborating, and so on and so forth. And this means thinking, because the resources of a country, people always tend to think that the resources of a country just derive from oil or mineral and so on and so forth. Switzerland that is there, what does it produce? Nothing. No Switzerland there. World's producer of chocolate. There's no one cocoa tree that grows there. Not one. They don't have no farm, nothing. And yet, Switzerland is a vibrant economy. People are simply using their heads. That's all. You've heard of Singapore, Malaysia, all these so-called Asian tiger and all this and so on and so forth. The kind of result we're talking about, they don't have. Use their heads. And for us, it's a challenge. We have to use our heads. And we have the thinking heads amongst us. We have the people. We have the brain. So we have to use our head to make sure that when this thing arrives, we can soft cushion it so that our people do not suffer anymore, and so on and so forth. Don't be surprised, and they will not do any charity in terms of your currency. We're going to lose out. We're going to lose out. Overnight, just to have to change a different franc. And all the what they had in their hands as their franc and so on, that's a useless piece of paper. What do we do? Well, these are serious challenges, you know, which any administration which will have to set up here in the diaspora have to think about, see how to go about it. At home, they're not thinking about those things because they simply assume somehow that the United Nations is going to come in, administer, provide money, whatever thing it is, and then move on. It's not going to happen that way. So we ought to think about that. And this brings me to the point, that final point, that each of us must be prepared to sacrifice. The brain work, of course, definitely. Our widow's mite, definitely. And also be determined even to die if need be for the purpose of liberation of that land. I'm willing to die knowing that as I'm dying, I know that my children have a place where they can go to say home. Right now, you can show all those children have no connection with that place whatsoever. And there's no future for all the young people. There's no home for them. There's no home. So we have a bounding responsibility to leave behind to them a home. And we need to fight to secure that home for them. The Eritreans have Eritrean friends. They told me, you know what we did? We simply imposed taxes on everybody. We called on every woman to sacrifice their jewel, all the ring they had, and so on and so forth. You know, following the biblical story, pound them and so on and so forth. Make money out of it. To secure it. And Eritrea fought for 30 years. They were able to sustain that war against the might of Ethiopia, supported by the Soviet Union. People don't realize that. They held their own for 30 years. And eventually they won. So our commitment has to get to a level. Financial sacrifices, our intellectual sacrifices, and if need be, sacrifices at the front. Of course, there are levels of sacrifices, abilities, and so on. There are some who have more fighting abilities than some of us. So those kinds of people who go to the front, face the bullet of the colonizer, and so on and so forth. Some other people will be very, very strong in contributing. The Bible talks about contributing their talents. But God has given us a talent. That talent may be an intellect, might be a little widow's mite which we're putting aside, and so on and so forth. And if we're able to do that, constitute one common front, I believe in under 3-4 years' time, we're talking about reconstruction of that place. And if the estimates which are here have been made about the resources in our territory, it surprised me that the British should not have known about this. From this Bacchus they're talking about, right up in Campbell. We would make a mockery of Kuwait. They don't know what to do with money at that point. Good thing is our country is not big, it's small. We can put all this dual carriageway here from Victoria right up to Campbell. It's what we must do anyway. There's no point why you come and have a dual carriageway here, we don't have it back at home. All of our students, young men and women are studying all kinds of things here. That will come in handy. By electric engineering, motor, whatever thing it is, have to come and construct the road for us and so on and so forth. So there is a lot that we have, just in terms of mineral resources, petroleum resources, gases, coal, salt. I even hear about diamond, nickel. No? Well, I'm not a mineral engineer, so I don't know, but from what the account we hear and so on, it seems that if the territory is really, really, really rich. So we need actually to make sure we liberate our territory, install ourselves, and do the things we want. And so I want to leave you with what I began with before, saying that there can be no beginning without